right, sermon number 2. So, in order to make beautiful music and have fun, you don't need to have complicated chords. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But, like, for example, I mean, this is a classic one. It seems so simple, but just in the key of E flat 1, going to 4 major 7. And then when you throw in something like a diminished chord, it has so much more meaning because you're kind of being more, more restrained with it. And you can find little patterns too. It often sounds really good and fresh musically, and instead of just playing either, because arpeggios are the main things that the Lego building blocks of improvisation, arpeggios, and then scale-wise motion. And then maybe little sequences, stuff like that. You start out with some repetitive pattern and then break away from it. Same rules of melody, all the stuff we've talked about in the past. But where was I going with that? I feel like I was going to make a point. Oh, you can find little patterns. So, like, for example, every major 7th chord has 2 major 3rds in it and also 2 perfect 5ths in it. And you can play around with those. I can be like... Right? It's the same sound, but because I'm kind of isolating the 5th sound, but it's conglomerating kind of into the implication of E flat major 7, it has a colder kind of 5th. Right? It has that perfect consonance kind of, and then if we do the other thing, right? Right? It's so much warmer. It's so much different of a sound. We're literally just talking about the same chord, but and you can put little chromatic passing tone. And if you have something like that, or even this line, you don't have to marry yourself to like one. That was just moving chromatically. F minor 7, F sharp minor 7, G minor 7. You could do the diminished thing. Right, add some extensions. I always do that. I'm sure you've noticed that, but because most if we're on 2, normally you'd have a 5 going to 1, or a tritone sub, right, or like a Lydian dominant 7. But I just literally like on. It's like a classic video game sound. But then again, you keep these 5ths, which go with F minor. Try to do a sequence, right? And you can then break it. So it always sounds so good when you start some sort of sequence, harmonic, melodically, or whatever, and then after 2 or 3 repetitions of it, you change something about it, whether it's and usually like the melody can be the same or the harmony changes. So like, right, and that was really just classic 2-5-1-6, right? So I just kind of went into that. I was doing this chromatic thing. So in other words, don't get too stuck in one palette. You can change palettes on the fly, you know, just like in this beautiful Howl's Moving Castle poster. You know, there's different subsets of color palettes. There's the sky, which has the white and the blue. Then there's all the grassy stuff with its color palette, you know, green and little dots of pink. And then you have her outfit, which has its own consistency. And then you have the dog with its own color palette. And then all of it kind of goes together, you know. There's commonalities in terms of the shapes and the colors and the general style. But at the same time, you know, you can have those distinctions as well as the uniformity of it. If you can see how that relates to... You know, if you can see how that relates to piano. Also, sometimes just being super slow can just make it so much more emotional. And then instead of keep on moving, maybe back. You know, that's another thing. That's another really common thing that people do, especially in video game music, is same progression over and over again, but then you eventually change it. Once you introduce these little things, like I thought, okay, you know, kind of C minor, make our way up to the flat 2, kind of darkens it a little bit, but then I kind of save that for that one moment harmonically. But then when we modulated to the new key, you know, what's the flat 2 of F minor? It's G flat. So you're giving it some consistency. So it seems like a novelty at first, but then once you develop it, then it becomes sort of like, so, you know, you can improvise compositions that sound like fully planned, but they're not. You're just sort of starting with little ideas that occur to you. You know, maybe you can spend some time just coming up with a cool motive or something, and then, you know, the improvisation can be fresh, even if the motive is kind of pre-planned or whatever, or a chord progression. You know, just some starting point so you're not like total blank deer in headlights, because we all experience that. But then when you introduce motives, if you like them as you hear them, you have to practice being self-aware while you're playing. Like, listen to yourself as you play and have practiced your ear enough that even as you're playing, if you hear something, you know, and if you can't play and listen to yourself and process all that at the same time, I do realize that requires some practice. But give yourself a little bit of space in the midst of the playing then. So let's say if I'm just doing, like, I don't know, something super simple. If I'm messing around with motives, and let's say for the case of example, I just happen upon a motive that I really like, just, especially if you're by yourself and you're not trying to perform, just toy around with it, like go with it. Right, so some sort of something, you know, and you can think about the gesture in terms of, you know, you can be really specific about the notes and kind of know in your head, you know, I want, or I could just be like, ya da dee 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 dee, right? You know, a different version of the same gesture might be, or maybe it could be, right? It has that same power of the gesture, a general contour and a general rhythm, but you can still, there's so many different melodic options you can put in there that sound good, right? There's so much more that sounds good than you'd think just from the 12 notes and all the music you've listened to. It's all about the relationships between the notes. No note means anything by itself. You know, you need 2 points at least in order to have a line, right? So, all right, have fun, guys.